there'll be some frustration or disappointment with what the future holds in terms of what President Biden promised in terms of advocating for the rights of Afghan people. He said we'll engage in regional diplomacy, we'll continue to speak out for Afghan girls. Speaking out, unfortunately, realistically, is going to be very limited in terms of the effects that it is going to have here on the ground in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. He talked also about rallying the world to join in with the U.S. Well, you know whose embassy isn't shut today, Jake? Russia's, China's. Those embassies staying open, those countries still engaged. And the fact that we just heard the State Department less than a week ago saying the embassy's not closing, guys, and the message is one of enduring partnership, those words sound hollow. And because those words sound hollow, the words we heard from the president, I believe, to many Afghans will also sound hollow. Jake.
Fareed Zakaria, we had this experience on my show yesterday with Secretary of State Blinken. They want to talk about whether or not the U.S. should stay in Afghanistan for another 20 years. That's obviously more comfortable terrain for the Biden administration than the manner of this exit and the idea of why it has been so ineptly and incompetently done, why President Biden didn't listen to military leaders who talked about how quickly, and intelligence officials who talked about how quickly the Taliban might take over the country, how quickly everything could collapse. The only time I really heard him addressing this, Fareed, was when he explained why they didn't take out so many Afghan translators, et cetera, earlier, and also when he said there was never going to ever be a good time to leave Afghanistan.
The questions that are facing the administration right now and that did not really get a lot of answers during that speech by President Biden were how this withdrawal happened. Those are the big questions and the big criticisms over the images that you are seeing, given we have top national security aides saying they did plan for every possible contingency, and that is what the White House is telling their Democratic allies on Capitol Hill as well, given the reality of what we are seeing on the ground and what Clarissa and Nick are reporting on and the images coming out of the airport in Kabul where there are desperate Afghans clinging to U.S. planes as they are taking off from the tarmac. Those are the big questions that are facing the White House over misjudging the intelligence, because President Biden did concede 6 weeks after saying he thought a Taliban takeover was highly unlikely, that it happened a lot faster than they expected. But the questions behind that are whether or not he was warned that this could happen, whether or not the U.S. intelligence did believe that was a possibility. And if they were preparing for every possibility, why was this not included in it? Because there are people who said, yes, this could happen. They thought it was going to take months. But people like the Secretary of State Blinken, who you interviewed yesterday, said they did not envision it being a Friday through Monday takeover, when we pretty much got a 72-hour takeover when it came to Kabul.
Caitlin Collins, thanks so much. David Axelrod, I want to bring you in because you said before the address that you thought that you wanted to hear President Biden accept responsibility for the catastrophe we've been watching take place in Afghanistan. Afghans desperate, running onto the tarmac, grabbing onto the wheels of U.S. Air Force planes, falling from those planes, almost like a cruel and tragic bookend to the falling man images that we saw on 9/11. He did say the buck stops with me, but I heard a lot of finger pointing. What did you think, David?
Yeah, look, I agree with you, Jake. I thought that his case for why we had to get out was strong, it was compelling, and I think he had to do that as well. But I do think that he needed to take responsibility. You know, my thoughts go back to President Kennedy.
I will say, though, having said all that, he didn't answer really important questions, like, for example, why wasn't, if this was very long in the planning, why wasn't it executed properly? Why wasn't the American military ready for this? Why didn't the people who wanted visas, despite what President Biden said, and were asking for it, as you have been talking about constantly, Jake, why weren't they brought out a long time ago, since we knew this deadline was going to happen?
David Chalian, President Biden keeps trying to change the subject from this inept withdrawal, which, just let's be frank here, if you withdraw 2,500 troops and then you have to send 6,000 back, that's not planned.
Right.
That's on its face an example of a failure. He keeps trying to change the subject from that to this straw man. It's not actually a straw man because there are people who want to keep an American presence there, but to the larger argument about an American presence continued in Afghanistan. I suppose that might work for some people.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think he succeeded in that goal today, right? Which is to reframe these horrific images of a clearly failed plan in departure here, to try and put it, as you called it earlier, Jake, into that safer political terrain of this larger notion of the decision to withdraw forces from Afghanistan. But you can't have both. We planned for every contingency, but the truth is it unfolded more quickly than we anticipated. Those two things don't actually go together, and it's that leaving that unanswered, I think, leaves this opportunity for legitimate criticism that I think the president is going to probably need to continue, or at least get back to, and try another take at getting those answers to why this didn't go as planned.
And Jeff Zeleny, to the point David Chine was just making, President Biden didn't take any questions today, but he's going to face tough questions from Republicans and Democrats in Congress. I mean, this was a foreign policy disaster, watching what we have watched unfold over the last few days. It is possible, I suppose, that if no Americans suffer an ill fate have in the last few days or do in the next week or two, if these rescue missions succeed, and God knows, I hope they do, it is possible that a large swath of the American people, and I'm not advocating for this, but a large swath simply won't care what happens to the Afghan people.
Jake, I think that's absolutely correct. And look, I mean, we've talked more about Afghanistan in the last 3 days than we have the last 3 months. This simply is not on the tops of the hearts and minds of most Americans right now. But that is really beside the point.